The 5-2 Bucs, who have won their last 5 out of 6 against New Orleans, will be on the road this week, facing off against an NFC South opponent, trying to get healthy before their bye week. We are live today with Michael Pless from Real Bucs Talk on this week's game preview of the Cannon Fire Podcast.
I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up with the head. Intercepted. 30. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew. Joining me today, as we mentioned in the open, from Real Bucs Talk, Michael Pless returns to the show. Michael, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Rhett. It's good to be back with you guys.
I appreciate you coming back on, especially on short notice, but we had to get a game preview in this week, and I'm excited because not only are the Buccaneers kind of catching a bye week at the perfect time here, if we're being honest. Doesn't feel too late, doesn't feel too early. Maybe you could argue it's like a week too late, but it's also Saints hate week, which I think a lot of us look forward to, especially because of that recent history. The Buccaneers winning their last 5 out of 6 games against New Orleans, and they seem to play pretty well in New Orleans, in Caesars Superdome, on the road. Last year on the road, they put up 51 points. Which they have yet to do since then. So they have come close, but they were on an absolute scoring spree last year in New Orleans, hoping for more of the same this year as they hopefully get to beat up on a 1-6 New Orleans team. But a 1-6 New Orleans team here, Michael, who is honestly a little bit more squirrely than people give them credit for. They don't seem to be an immediate threat in the NFC South, but I mean, you look at the landscape of no-win and one-win teams across the NFL, I'd say they're one of the better of the bunch.
Yeah, I agree. I think they've been playing in close games. Like, a lot of their games they haven't, faced too many blowout. They usually compete, and they play hard. They're going to play physical style of football. And I think their quarterback Spencer Rattler has done a pretty decent job, for them as far as QB1 and then defensively, I think they do a lot of different things. Their secondary has struggled. They're still, up there as far as run defense, and they still have a lot of names on that side of the ball that they lean on. And then, offensively, I think it's more of, let's get the ball to Kamara, try to feature him, and then they try to take their shots down the field with Chris Olave. And we've been seeing that kind of recently pick up, in recent weeks.
And the Bucs honestly have struggled, I think, these last few weeks. When you look at San Francisco and Detroit, those explosive plays taking the top off of this defense, some of them broken plays, but you're seeing a lot more explosive plays against the Buccaneers defense here the last few weeks. So hoping that's not an issue. But I want to open things up here and really start to highlight some of the storylines on the offensive side of the ball. I want to talk about the run game, because when we start to break down Josh Grizzard so far in his first season as OC, we're seeing Baker Mayfield play some of the best football of his career outside of last week's performance against Detroit. Hopefully that's kind of the outlier for the season. But the run game has disappeared. The Bucs right now are sitting at 24th in the NFL in rushing offense. Conveniently, the Saints not off to the best start. They aren't as strong as they have been before at defending the run. They are averaging 129.4 yards per game given up.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that this is a game, especially before the bye week, where you're still missing Bucky Irving. You're missing some of your big guys up front, but I do think it's a good opportunity to maybe try and be stubborn with the run game this week. Try and get things going with Rashad White, Sean Tucker going to be playing in this game. I think I saw Josh Williams got cleared from concussion protocol, so he should be called up playing in this game. Maybe he gets a snap. But I hope this week they get the run game going, and I'm going to ask you, when you look at these first 8 weeks of the season, or 7 weeks of the season as we approach the halfway point, what do you think the biggest issue is comparing Josh Grizzard's run game in Tampa versus Liam Cohen's? Because, last year the Bucs were a wagon. And again, Bucky Irving was a big part of that, especially as the year went on and he was getting more snaps. But I mean,
Yeah.
it has been a glaring absence in the Buccaneers' skill set this season so far. The run game just hasn't been what it was.
Yeah, I think Bucky, plays a huge part of that. Not him not being healthy, obviously that hurts. But when you look at the offensive line and you look at the loss of Cody Mock, you look at Luke Gedeke being out, those two guys right there were a huge factor in the Buccaneers' run success last year because they were ability to just double team that right side, kind of cave it in. You create a lot of cutback opportunities for your running backs. And not having Tristan Wirfs till week 4, he's starting to get back into his old self. And then, same thing with like Graham Barton, adjusting back to center responsibilities. That's a lot, playing left tackle and then going to center, that transition kind of happens all over again for him. So, doing different things in the run game, I think the types of runs that they were running last year versus this year are different, but that also goes into what is your personnel? What do you have on the field? What are their strengths? The Bucs have exclusively run a lot of gap, scheme runs, whether that's, counter gap or just power. They've mixed in some duo here and there, but we haven't really seen like a lot of the outside zone runs, a lot of the pin and pull or like toss plays. Some of those things have been kind of missing, but that goes into what do you have, to work with. And I think Rachaad White, his best plays are running it inside the tackles, using the lead blockers that they're trying to incorporate. You also have to remember you lost Ko Keefe. So Ko Keefe was another big run blocker in this offense, especially used as that hybrid type tight end. They've used Payne Durham some in that role, and some of it has worked really well. I like some of the runs that they were trying to establish last week, but you only ran the ball 11 times. So I think commitment to the run is definitely has to be picked up. I think you have to continue to stay with it and really force feed, because we see when Baker has to throw the ball more than 35 times, usually that's not a good sign for success. And you look at the 2 losses that the Bucs have had, he's had over 40 attempts in both games, and usually that means not good news for the Bucs. So I think they're definitely going to try to run the football against this Saints defense. Like you said, they're kind of towards the back end. Same thing with their pass defense. So they struggled as a unit on that side. But they still have names that you have to be aware of. But the Bucs should be able to run the football this week. They just got to continue to pound the rock and use what they have there, especially with Sean Tucker, who had his best game last season against the Saints. So you're hoping things can repeat themselves there.
Man, you're not kidding about Sean Tucker. Last season, 14 carries, 136 yards, 1 touchdown in that game against New Orleans. And then through the air, 3 receptions, 56 yards, 1 touchdown. All of that notched him NFC Offensive Player of the Week honors. A great performance for Sean Tucker. So, yeah, hopefully we get a heavy dose of Sean Tucker. I think that at this point, if you're going to be stubborn with the run, it would be beneficial to see what we have outside of Rachaad White, just from a pure depth standpoint. I think, again, this is the week you can be a little stingy with it. But I'm glad you mentioned the offensive line as well. I want to talk to you about this right guard situation. And we say situation because, I don't know if it is a situation. I don't know if we're ultimately going to see a change here. But Mike Jordan last week made his return to the lineup, jumping from left guard to right guard. Let's not forget that either. Earlier in the season, the Buccaneers were shuffling guys around, so he was playing left guard, missed some time due to injury, comes back, plays right guard. Didn't look great. Now, in the time that he was gone, we saw Luke Haggard. Luke Haggard got injured. We saw a little bit of Elijah Klein. Elijah Klein didn't look great. But again, looking at right guard here moving forward without Cody Mauch for the foreseeable future. And then again, I don't know when reinforcements are going to come back at that right tackle spot. With everything that we hear about Luke Gedeke and this injury, I'd be surprised if he has a right foot at this point. I think that it's, I think that they're being purposely vague about it. And I don't know. I don't love the feeling. The timeline went from 3 to 4 weeks to all of a sudden, we hope he plays this season. So I don't know. I'm just going to assume he's not coming back for a while. But back to right guard here. Do you think Michael Jordan is the answer for the Buccaneers? Uh, Again, as they look to rally and get healthy, or do you think a change there might be something they evaluate during the bye week?
Yeah, I think it's a week to week thing. I personally believe Luke Haggard was the better player. He played really well in those games against Seattle and San Francisco. And I thought he did a really good job coming in and kind of stabilizing that position for the team. And I would like to see that continue. I know he had his ups and downs in that Jets game that he started. Obviously, the first quarter was just not good for any offensive lineman in that game, where all the penalties. But after that, and especially in the second half, Luke Haggard from that point forward, I thought was really good and played well. And from that span, he basically played in I think 4 straight games. Unfortunate, he got hurt in the Niners game, and now they went back to Mike Jordan. Yeah, and Jordan just wasn't good. Like on tape, it wasn't a pretty sight to watch, especially going up against, and they struggled against Salim McNeil, DJ Reader. That defensive front in general for the Lions really had their way. And I think that's like the key for when you look at this Bucs team, when the offensive line plays stable and plays solid, this team's going to win the game. And I think that's been evident in all their wins. That's what you have to look for early. If the offensive line is playing well and giving Baker time and making him feel comfortable, then you have something that's a much better product.
We got an interesting question in the chat here, and I think it's a good question to transition over to the quarterback position. Spencer G says, do you think if the offensive line was completely healthy versus the Lions, that would have been a different game? And I think, again, it is a very interesting point because, yeah, I think the game would have been different. The Buccaneers gave up 30 pressures against Detroit last week, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the most by any team so far in any game this 2025 regular season. So something to improve on for sure. Baker didn't have a lot of time back there. But with that being said, in the few sparing moments that he did have time last week, Michael, he was not great. And again, we hope that that's going to be an outlier because I think with every other game that he's played this season, the good far outweighs the bad. And quarterbacks have games like that every now and again. So I have all the faith that Baker's going to bounce back. But ultimately, let me throw that question at you. Do you think if the O-line was completely healthy versus the Lions, that game would have been different entirely? Or do you think Baker could have still maybe had a bad day at the office?
No, I think it would have been different. I mean, like you said, he missed throws. Like there was plenty of opportunities where he did have time and he missed guys. And again, that could be credited to, I think he did suffer a injury during the game. I think that definitely happened because he was on the injury report this week. He looks like he's going to be fine for Sunday, but has a knee and a oblique injury as well. So that can factor in during that game where maybe he was just playing on adrenaline and trying to, gut through it. And a lot of his throws were just inaccurate. He was missing guys high. And that comes with uncomfortability in the pocket and trying to readjust yourself. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, if they had all starting 5 offensive linemen, the game would have been a lot different. I think you would have been able to maybe commit to the run a little bit more, maybe feel comfortable with that. And that goes back to our earlier point. Like they just need to really commit to running the football, and that has to be a foundation piece for their offense because that's going to help out Baker. You got to utilize the play action passing game. That's something that has worked well. So I think when you put those two things into place and limit the times Baker has to drop back, that's going to reduce the amount of opportunities for sacks, pressures, turnover worthy plays. All those things come into it. So, yeah, it starts with that running game. We have to find a way to get that going this week.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word turnovers in there as well. And as it pertains to Baker Mayfield, only 2 interceptions on the season. Both of those interceptions came in the Bucs' only losses of the year. He threw a pick against the Eagles, much more costly than the one against the Lions. Because we can argue all day about the one against the Lions. It wasn't an interception. But regardless, the Buccaneers lose the game. There's nothing else we can do about that. But taking care of the football this week going to be a huge emphasis on that. I do expect the offensive line to protect him better everybody's going to be in a bounce back mood from that Monday night performance. I know it's a short week, and guys are looking forward to the bye week, but this is an NFC South opponent. This is a physical game, so they got one more before they can take it easy a little bit, and I think everybody's ready to do just that. Heading into some of the offensive weapons for Tampa Bay, some of the guys who are going to be stepping up, Emeka Egbuka is the obvious one here. He's stepping into that X receiver spot with Mike Evans going down, missing some time, so he's going to garner a lot of double coverage. We're going to be expecting guys to continue to step up, guys who have already stepped up this season, especially in a big way. Tez Johnson, a couple of touchdowns over the last 2 weeks for him. Cade Otton. Sterling Shepard has been playing really well in the early part of the season. I think it's some of the most productive time he's had in Tampa. So we're obviously going to be highlighting some of these. Is there any specific matchup on the offensive side of the ball that you're most looking forward to when it comes to any of those guys or anybody else that I haven't mentioned?
No, I think you covered it there. I think Egbuka is obviously going to be a focal point for the passing offense. Tez Johnson and Sterling Shepard are going to be the next guys to look for. And I think when you look at the Saints defense, they primarily play a lot of zone defense, but that could change because of what they saw last week on tape. Maybe they switch to more man coverage and try to play that type of style. And the Saints secondary has struggled as a unit. I think the downfield throws can be had. I think underneath is where you want to start. I think there's a lot of opportunities to get them short and try to get, yak yards. And that's something that the Buccaneers have had success with in past weeks. So, utilizing the underneath throws to guys running to space, I think that's going to be very important, especially with Sterling Shepard, Tez Johnson, Cam Johnson, all the guys that we have, like utilize them in different ways and open up, Cade Otton when he can get out into route concepts, because it just really depends. Like, are you going to have double teams on Cam Jordan for the Saints? I don't think so. But again, we just have to make sure Baker is protected. And you do that by running the football and then using smart passing plays, passing concepts to get the ball out to your playmakers in space. Because with Mike Evans out, and I'm hoping we can finally turn the injury button off, because it seems like there just keeps happening every week. Mike Evans being out, that's a huge loss. I mean, because he dictates a lot of the concepts or defenses that you're going to see in the secondary. So now that shifts towards Egbuka. Egbuka is going to get a lot of the attention, and you got to find ways to isolate matchups. And so I would be looking at isolating their nickel back or their secondary corner. Like, that's where you got to go, and you got to find those voids in their defense and just keep attacking it until they shift. And when they shift, then that's when, Emeka can have his opportunities.
You talked about the wide receiver depth there. Sorry, I was pulling up something here, and it took
No,
me a
you're
second.
good.
You started talking about the wide receiver depth there and all the Johnsons in the wide receiver room. There is one more, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, with Mike Evans going onto IR. They signed former Tennessee and UCF wide receiver Brandon Johnson to the practice squad. Originally entered the league as a college free agent with the Broncos. He was with them from 2022 to 23, and then he was with the Steelers in 2024. Again, depth here with Mike Evans going to IR, but I wanted to ask you about Chris Godwin. Jalen McMillan, latest reports are he's still walking around in a neck brace. Don't have a clear timetable on his return. Really, a lot of the injuries right now, we don't have a clear timetable for. Chris Godwin is one of them. Jalen McMillan, Bucky Irving is, again, very concerning, and then Luke Gedeke, as we had mentioned earlier. Let me ask you about Chris Godwin, though. Comes back, plays a little bit, aggravates his foot again with a fibula injury. What I mean is I'm trying to think of how to put this. Is Chris Godwin ever going to be the same? Like, is this one of those things that when he comes back and he's fully healthy and ready to go, he's going to look like the guy that we all knew and loved before? Or, again, going back to the draft process with his rehabilitation issues that the Bucs were aware of, and I guess the possibility that he could suffer another injury, like, this is, I don't know. I don't want to overreact, but at the same time, I also want to be realistic about Chris Godwin, his situation, and where he is as a player for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, kind of need him right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm just hoping he can get back to, 80%, 90% of Chris Godwin of what we've seen in the past. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, when you suffer the injury that he did last year, and you're rehabbing, you're doing so much to try to get back onto the field, and he gets back out into the field against the Eagles, and we could see, like, there was definitely rust there. There was a guy that just it showed he hasn't played in a year. Like, that obviously was like there was signs there showing that. And in Seattle, same thing. Unfortunately, gets hurt during that game, and has a fibula. And I don't know what kind of injury that could be. It could be, I don't know, stress, maybe a stress fracture, something along those lines. But you're just hoping after the bye week, you're hoping he comes back relatively soon. But at the same time, I'm kind of in the mindset of, let's just hope we can have Mike, Chris, and Jalen McMillan back by the playoffs. If we can, that's a win. Like, even if we can just get 2 out of the 3 of those guys, I'd be like, I'm happy. I'm good. And I think that's how you have to play this. So I think they're going to play it as safe as possible. If the losses start to creep up, and let's say you win this week and get to 6-2, which is awesome. But let's say you come out of the bye and you have 3 really tough games right in, back to back to back. And let's say you drop those games and you get to 6-5. Then comes the time, okay, now you're thinking about hopefully getting these guys back in there as soon as you can. But if they keep winning, and guys, like, if it just allows them more time to get these guys 100%. I think that's what they're hoping to do, and they're not really giving it a serious, like, timeline or expectation. But I think some of these guys will start to get back in there, at least we hope, and turn this injury button off.
Yeah, you're not kidding, man. And again, going back to the draft process, Emeka Egbuka, what a surprise that was for everybody in the stadium that night. I mean, I think a lot of people watching at home were kind of scratching their heads initially, because going into it, man, it really wasn't wide receiver at the top of most people's draft boards. And I think that Jason Light and his crystal ball, this is a pick at 19 for the Bucs that is aging better and better by the day. So hopefully Emeka Egbuka, of all people, can continue to stay healthy and continue the ridiculous pace he is on for a rookie in the NFL, man. I really hope he's able to finish here strong and be a legitimate contender for Offensive Rookie of the Year. That would be awesome to see. We talk a little bit about explosive rookies. We'll wrap up the wide receiver conversation with just some cool kind of trivia, I guess. Kool-Aid McKinstry in the New Orleans secondary going to be on the field this week against Tez Johnson. They were former high school teammates. So that's going to be a matchup to potentially watch. I think he's going to be shadowing Tez Johnson, among other guys as well. He leads the Saints with 2 interceptions this year, but he's also kind of prone to giving up big plays. He's been on the receiving end of a few explosive plays so far this season, so I think that's something to watch, especially as they want to continue to get Tez Johnson here involved in the offense. And I'm excited because he looks capable of doing it, especially last week with the yards after catch against the Lions. One of the few lone bright spots of that game, if we're being honest. That was an impressive effort by Tez Johnson. But I want to dive into the other side of the football here, and I want to open things up. I want to be provocative. I want to get the people going. We got a lot of people on our live chat. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us. Trade candidates. Listen. Listen. We have come to peace with the reality we live in, being that Jason Light is one of those GMs. What is the quote? We have our guys. We like our guys. Yeah. And that's all fine and dandy. But we have some guys who are very clear liabilities. And I want to go to the linebacker room here, because the big matchup everybody's looking at this week is Servassier Dennis / Levante David against Alvin Kamara, a guy who has given the Buccaneers issues at this point for close to a decade, it feels like. He's made it clear he's going to be in New Orleans until he hangs up the cleats, so it's just something we're going to have to deal with. And he is a guy who is particularly effective in the receiving game. The Buccaneers have given up the most receiving yards to running backs than any other team in the NFL. Servassier Dennis, per PFF, has allowed 438 yards in coverage, the worst in the NFL by a very large margin. It is more than any other defensive back, and it is 100 yards more than the next closest linebacker. So again, I mean, I think if you're New Orleans, a 1-6 team who plays the Bucs like it's their Super Bowl, you're chomping at the bit to target the middle of the field and to target number 8. It almost feels like malpractice if the Buccaneers just pretend that everything is fine with their guys at the linebacker position. Now, I don't know if Deion Jones is that much of a downgrade compared to Servassier Dennis, but the numbers speak for themselves on just the liability that this guy has been. And it's, it's not like he's whiffing tackles. On top of whiffing tackles, he is giving up 30, 40, 50, 75-yard plays. Like it's every single week at this point. So I don't want to ask, like, who are some trade candidates at linebacker, because I don't expect it to happen. But Michael Pless, the last time the Buccaneers made a trade midseason, it was for Steve McClendon, and they just so happen to win the Super Bowl that February. So, like, I'm not saying if they make a trade that they're going to win the Super Bowl, but I'm also saying that if they don't make a trade, Servassier Dennis might be historically bad in coverage for the Buccaneers this season, and that is going to hold back what feels like, in a lot of ways, a vastly improved defensive unit. They have finally figured out how to take the ball away, but they can't stop giving up yards.
Yeah, I mean, giving up yards is going to be something that just, it stays with Todd Bowles' defense. I mean, but at the same time, like you said, they have to fix the linebacker position. It's not great. Like, that's just not even good, really. With Servassier, I think he's done a decent to good job as far as run defense and being a blitzer. Got a sack this last week. But yeah, when it comes to coverage, and even when he's in the right position in coverage, the click and close, the ability to get downhill, make a tackle, that's kind of been missing too. At times it's okay in the middle of the field, but when we have to go sideline to sideline, that's when it becomes an issue. You see he's trying to over pursue guys, and he's leaving the cutback lanes open. He's leaving the ability to allow even more yards because he's missing these tackles. And that happens when you're not the best of athlete, and you're also not the biggest of guys. Like, you don't have a lot of length to your game, not a lot of reach there to depend on. So that hurts. And that goes back to, like, the whole draft question. Emeka Egbuka, he's going to be a star. Like, he's a receiver number 1. But at the same time, I'm sure they had to balance that against Jahad Campbell, who is a linebacker taken at 30th overall. And it's like, man, if this Bucs defense had Jahad Campbell right now, things could be vastly different as far as just the defensive overall performance. But at the same time, it's like, well, I don't know who we're going to throw the ball to this week, but, we'll just hope for the best. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's something that they should look at. I think if they had to make trades, you look at the linebacker position, and you also look at potentially your offensive line. But again, I know offensive line, getting one of those guys, probably not going to happen because no one wants to give up offensive line. And it's the same thing with, like, edge rushers. I know a lot of people were talking about edge position and, like, but usually those guys aren't going to be just thrown out for nothing. Usually it's going to cost you a premium pick. And same thing can be said with the offensive line, unless you're able to get, a veteran offensive lineman. And this would be for the right guard position, because I would like to shore that up, and then it's not a problem anymore. But I don't know if Jason Light usually is not that type of guy to do that. Linebacker, I think it's an obvious upgrade. And I think linebacker is a position where they can go out and find a starter that can step in And then you can put Servassier in as that kind of rotational piece that I think maybe that's his best spot. And you can also play him on special teams more, which would help your special teams. So I think there is a obvious move to be made. It's just going to come down to who's available. Is it the right fit? What's the cost? Can it cost you maybe a fourth or a fifth round pick to go get maybe a Jordan Brooks out of Miami? Maybe a Logan Wilson. Logan Wilson hasn't been the greatest this year. He's been demoted, and that's why he wants out. But he could do a lot more than what Servassier Tennis is providing you at the moment. So I think that is a move that you look at, or even a Quincy Williams from the Jets, who I was really impressed with when he played the Bucs. Like, that's a guy you go out and just, give him a fifth and say, we can start you tomorrow.
Yeah. No, you're not kidding. And I think, again, it's hard to find reinforcements this time of year that are going to be a massive upgrade, but I think anything is going to be some sort of Band-Aid on the bleeding that has been these linebackers in coverage. And yeah, you did mention Servassier Dennis doing some things well. I think in run defense, he's been strong. He's come up big. Does have a couple of sacks on the season, if I'm not mistaken. So he looks competent. He looks physical at times. And even last season, the Servassier Dennis that we saw before he went down with season-ending injury was far better than anything we have seen so far this season. But maybe scaling back the play time, as crazy as it sounds, maybe the smaller sample size can help make him a more explosive player. We talk about sample size on this Buccaneers defense, and you have to look, again, back at the secondary here. Jamel Dean has been rotating in and out with Benjamin Morrison a little bit more, but this is the most productive he has been in Tampa Bay in years. This is the best he's looked in a very long time. When you look at Jamel Dean, the uptick in interceptions, something that this defense has desperately needed. Do you look at that rotation kind of playing a part? Do you look at it being a contract year for him and he just really is motivated to put some good tape out there? Like, it could be a multitude of factors here with Jamel Dean, but what do you think the biggest one may be?
Well, you said it. I think contract year, with the restructure and there's motivation there. I think the addition of Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish to have more pieces in play to take your job, I think has also factored in. And then the number one thing, he's healthy. That's the biggest thing. Like, he's battled through some injuries already this season, and that's going to happen. I mean, every corner in this league goes down at some point throughout the year. It just does. But the main thing is, like, he's battled through, suffering those hip and like leg injuries so far. And when he's on the field, he's been lights out and he's catching the football. That's the big thing. Like, he's in position to make plays. He's got 3 interceptions. And he's on track to have a career year. So you just hope that continues. I'm a huge fan of Benjamin Morrison, a huge fan of Jacob Parrish. I think those guys have really made the secondary more complete and more just overall really good. Like, they are continuing to get better. And I think the move of Tyke Smith to safety, him and Antoine Winfield have been really strong. And that should continue to pick up. And just, they have it all right there. Zion McCollum, I think, has made some progress too, especially in man coverage. I think he's made some strides there. Zone coverage, I think, is still a strength for this team, especially with Jamel Dean. Like, he's lights out in zone coverage. And that's huge for this Bucs defense.
Yeah, 100.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, 100% I agree that specifically Tyke Smith and Jacob Parrish, I'm a big fan of that physical brand of defense. And those guys have been, everything and then some when it comes to the physical brand of football. Jacob Parrish, especially for a rookie, being as eager as he is to just go lay guys out. We saw Tyke Smith get folded up with the big offensive lineman for San Francisco a couple of weeks ago. I mean, these guys are playing with a purpose right now, and I think that the more players you have like that on the defensive side of the ball is just going to lead to more of that, what's the stat called? The havoc that is created by this defense. That's one of the things they've trended very well so far in this season. But Taking a look at another aspect of this Buccaneers defense, I want to talk about this front seven, specifically the pass rush here.
Mhm.
Or really the front four, I guess. No Hassan Reddick.
Yeah.
So Yaya Diaby is going to have an extra spotlight. He has been A+ so far this season, honestly. He's doing very, very well at getting after the quarterback. But when you look along this defensive line here, Vita Vea was questionable, didn't practice all week. I think he plays. Luckily, we have been getting some strong depth from the interior depth. We've been getting some strong play from those guys. Sorry, excuse me. Words are kind of getting hard. Elijah Simmons has been stepping up, playing very, very well. Elijah Roberts, the rookie, has been stepping up, playing well as they continue to give him more snaps. But outside of Yaya Diaby, when you look at this edge rusher group, and you look at Chris Braswell, who, in my opinion, just kind of looks like a dude, and Anthony Nelson, who looks like another dude, like do you see an effective week for Yaya Diaby? And outside of him, do you see anybody else who can kind of step up here as we may be out of Hassan Reddick for a little bit of time?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, with losing Reddick, I thought Reddick and Diaby were playing really well. A lot of people look at the stats and are like, "Well, he only has one sack," and I'm like, "Well, he's doing his job though. He's playing really well. He's getting after the quarterback. He's pressuring." Same thing with Yaya. So now you don't have him, so it's going to create more emphasis from Vita Vea, and I thought Vita had a good game against Detroit. I think Vita Vea, Elijah Roberts is a starter now. He's taken over that position from Logan Hall, which makes me very happy. If guys don't know in the chat, as far as real Bucks talk, we do not like Logan Hall. Nothing personal. It's just a game. It's just the game itself. But you're gonna have more of those guys step up, especially in the interior. I would love to see more Elijah Simmons get in there, because I feel like he can push the pocket, and you're gonna have those types of players. Either you have to be someone that can win with your first move and create disruption, or you got to be a guy that can condense and crush the pocket to really make that quarterback either move towards Yaya because Yaya can chase him down, or get him off his spot. So I think that is going to be the game plan for them with Chris Braswell. Braswell is probably going to be still your sub rusher, where you're hoping he can come in and provide some speed off the edge, and just tell him, hey, just pin your earbacks and go. Anthony Nelson, I think, is going to be more of what I was talking about as far as like condensing the pocket. That's going to be his job. And at times we've seen him step up when it comes to the sack department. He has done that in the past. So you're hoping that can come to fruition this week against a Saints offensive line that has struggled. They have two very young tackles out there in Fuaga and Kelvin Banks. And also the interior is new. You have a new starting center, so that can create problems as well. So yeah, definitely a very good time to get some sacks this week, because Spencer Rattler, I think he's got 15 sacks on the season, does tend to hold the ball a little bit, but also goes into our first point. He will check the ball down. He only averages 6.2 yards per pass. So I think you try to play a condensed coverage this week and really force him to hold the ball a little bit longer.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question, actually, was talking about Spencer Rattler. He is a guy who checks the ball down and doesn't have a tendency to turn it over so far. He does have 4 picks on the season, but 3 of those came in one game. He's not going to light you up. He's not going to take the top off of your defense per se. Wouldn't be surprised if they take a shot or two this week. But, I mean, truthfully, I think the Bucs are just going to have to deal with him getting the ball out of his hands quickly. So, containing Alvin Kamara, how confident are you that they can kind of handle those 2 tasks at once here? Because again, I don't know if Spencer Rattler is a guy that they can necessarily scare into making as many mistakes as some of the other QBs they've faced this year. Even though he's a young starter, he takes care of the ball.
He does. Yeah, I'm looking at his game log here. And again, a lot of these games he does get sacked multiple times. So I think that's something you look for. Hopefully you can force some turnovers in that regard. But when you look at his yards per pass attempt, again, not great. The last 3 games has been his highest marks. He's averaged over 7.5 yards per pass. So they have increased as far as going down the field. Um, so I think the main thing for the Bucs defense is being in position, rallying to the football, and gain tackling. I think is going to be very important because you don't want to have Kamara in one-on-one situations where he can just make someone miss and then he busts it for 30 to 40 yards. I think that's going to be the key in this game. Don't allow the big plays. Force them to move it up and down the field, and red zone defense come in and make your stops and try to hold them to 3. But at the same time, I think you just have to be smart with how aggressive you are, call it at the right times, and try to create turnovers. And for the most part, the Bucs defense has done that this year. So
Yeah.
I think that is something to look for.
Yeah, it's become a little bit of a trend for them these last few weeks, which is a positive trend for a defense that was just starving for any kind of takeaway last season in 2024. So I'm glad that that's becoming a trend. Hopefully it can continue again as they have one more NFC South opponent before the bye week, just trying to get healthy. And it feels like they're almost there, and then it's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back because you get an injury report like you did on Thursday, and that was very frightening for a lot of people to see.
Yeah.
Going back into the Bucs here, I want to highlight New Orleans, and when we start to, I guess, try and predict some of these offensive tendencies, they just lost their running back too for the season. Kendre Miller went down for with a torn ACL, so they're likely going to call up their 6th-round draft pick Devin Neal. Now, I don't know how impactful he's going to be. He's a big old question mark as far as I'm concerned because I don't know a lot about him. But with his presence, if the Buccaneers can handle Alvin Kamara, you look at some of the guys who have given the Bucs problems before. Rashid Shaheed is up there. He could get some more targets this week. But I really wanted to highlight one of my least favorite players of all time, like not even currently, but of all time, Taysom Hill. Do you expect maybe a heavier dose of Taysom Hill this week? Because, again, he is a guy who has given the Buccaneers no shortage of problems over the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with Taysom Hill, and he's frustrating for me as well because every time I see him come into the game, I'm like, okay, we know who's getting the ball.
Yeah.
Like we already know he's getting the ball. He's going to do something with the football,
and it works. And it works.
Yeah.
It always works.
That's the most frustrating part. It's like, I'm like, okay, just go attack Taysom Hill. He is going to run with it, and that's all they have to do. And I'm like. But yeah, I could see them utilizing him, whether it's running the football or maybe throwing or receiving. So you just have to keep an eye on him. He's definitely, once he goes in the game, they're going to do something with him, and you just got to be prepared for that. Jawan Johnson, he's another good tight end for them. He's someone you gotta watch. But they have skill position players, so it's going to be key for, like I said in the beginning. You're going to have to find ways to attack Spencer Rattler, whether A, taking away his first read and making him hold the football, or you're going to have to speed him up and make him check it down and then tackle behind that. So I think that is some things to look for, especially in this game early on, and see how they attack him and how they play it. At the same time, I think Todd Bowles has done an excellent job of kind of baiting quarterbacks and baiting offensive game plans too, because we saw that in the Niners game where we weren't really blitzing in the first half, and then in the second half they kind of picked up things and they forced Mac Jones into some mistakes. So I think you could see that. Same thing with like the Lions game. They did it in that game as well. They weren't really coming after Goff early, and then they finally did, and they picked up some things, and they're able to get some turnovers.
Some final keys to victory here before we get into our predictions to wrap up this week's game preview. Just some things I wanted to mention, kind of had an asterisk next to, wanted to make sure I had time to fit it in here. Protecting Baker Mayfield, back on that topic for this offensive line. Expecting Michael Jordan back in the lineup here for the Buccaneers at right guard, but largely as normal as they have been in terms of health on the offensive line. Big Tristan Wirfs at left tackle, Ben Bredesen moving back to left guard, Graham Barton at center, and then, of course, right guard and right tackle being Charlie Heck. Let me ask you about Charlie Heck. We talked about Mike Jordan earlier.
Mhm.
He struggled against Detroit, but Charlie Heck, I think that, yes, we can very quickly point to some struggles, but in the grand scheme of how we thought he was going to do headed into week one, I think he's done, dare I say this, a little more good than bad this year for the Buccaneers offensive line. So what do you think of Charlie Heck and ultimately protecting Baker Mayfield headed into this matchup?
Yeah, I think he's done. I think he's done okay. I put him at average. I think he is what he is. Again, he's a swing tackle. He's not designed to be a starter. Um, and I think what you hope for him is just to be adequate or somewhat close to being good. Like just be doing your job. Stay in the way. Don't let anything get get to Baker. If you're going to get beat, make sure you strain the hell out of your block and find a way to keep that guy off of Baker Mayfield. Um, and that's a huge key. I think the Bucs offensive line has to really raise their play because last week it was just not a good game at all. And you just got outclassed by a very strong front seven. And they had an excellent game plan as well. I think a lot of guys have to step up their game. That includes Graham Barton. Graham Barton's got to be a lot better at center. I think Michael Jordan and Charlie Heck, all three of those guys have to really raise their game. And, Tristan Wirfs, Ben Bredesen, same thing. Like, they got to find some consistency. And you're hoping that now that they've had a game together, and hopefully, if this is going to be the offensive line moving forward for at least the next several weeks, you got to pick it up, and hopefully that happens with some continuity back there. Yeah, it's just got to be better.
Yeah, right tackle Charlie Heck certainly going to have his hands full in some regard this week. I know it's not as full-fledged as the Lions front seven last week, but a couple of good edge rushers here in New Orleans who are still productive. Carl Granderson especially, big number 96.
Yeah.
4.5 sacks through the first 7 games, leads the team right now. And then Cam Jordan, you always have to keep an eye on. Does a lot of talking, is largely quiet against Tampa Bay. Hopefully we get some more of that this coming week. But Michael Pless, I'm going to put you on the spot here. What kind of key to victory do you have for the Bucs this week that we just didn't have time to highlight today?
I mean, we kind of talked. I mean, we talked about commitment to the run game. I think that would be number one. But if I had to put something else in there, I would say the passing game needs to be more simple as far as base, like just simple in mindset. Like just run simple drag routes to get Tez Johnson, Cam Johnson out in space. Find easy completions for Baker Mayfield. I think is going to be the biggest thing because we got to find a way to start fast. And I think that's the main difference with Grizzard versus Liam Cohen. Liam would really empty his bag early in the game and find a way to get this offense to start fast. I think Grizzard is more of a guy that's trying to set things up for later on. But I think Baker needs something that can get him comfortable right away. And that's something that needs to happen in this game. You got to find that rhythm and that spark early. And then the rest of it should pick up from there.
Yeah, and you talked about Liam Cohen kind of emptying the bag. Listen, there is no shame in the game of checkdowns. And I think that was one of the things that was missing from Baker's arsenal last week when you kind of break down how uncomfortable he was in the pocket. He's going through his reads and he's missing his checkdowns. There's a couple of snaps that you can go back and look, and Emeka Ibuka's just standing there waiting for him to throw the ball, and he's throwing it down the sideline because he's trying to take a 20-yard shot. I just think getting him comfortable early on, finding some cohesive way to do that. Again, whether it is finding success in the run game, which is kind of a bonus and a luxury for QB at that point, or just getting those quick checkdowns, getting him in the habit of getting the ball out of his hands quickly is going to be huge for Tampa Bay. I agree here. Some score predictions as we wrap things up, and we'll highlight some people in the chat as well, so drop your score predictions. I have every belief in the world that this is a get-right game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but one of the things that we haven't entirely mentioned is that the Saints always play this game like it is their Super Bowl, and for some reason, the Buccaneers could win a Super Bowl, and the Saints could have 2 wins on the year. and I'd be the least bit shocked to find out one of those is against Tampa. Now, again,
Yeah.
the Bucs have fared well, won their last 5 out of 6 against New Orleans, but there's always that outside chance, right? People talk week to week about parity in the NFL, and it is a very real thing. It is any given Sunday, any given team could win. And with the Saints being one of the squirrelier 1-6 teams in the NFL right now, I wouldn't entirely count them out. But they're just not a good team. And I think that Spencer Rattler is kind of at a point where if the Buccaneers can take Alvin Kamara out of the game, I think that they can most certainly outpace Spencer Rattler in the Saints offense. Again, hopefully you find some success with the guys that you need to step up and continue to step up. But like the way that Tez Johnson's been playing, he's going to get open. I like seeing Cade Otton get a lot more active in the pass game. People have been begging for that all year. I think he's going to find a way to get his. Emeka Egbuka, I'm curious to see how he does over the next few weeks, especially after the bye week, taking over a much more ample opportunity as basically the wide receiver one for this offense for the foreseeable future. Something that I think we knew was going to be coming at some point, but I don't think anybody thought it was going to happen 7 weeks into the season. So with all of that being said, I know I'm kind of rambling at this point. With all of that being said, I am going to take the Buccaneers to win a frustrating at time game. Frustrating at times game. I will say 27. Let's go 27-21. 27-21. I got the Bucs by 6 here. What do you got?
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were gonna steal my score prediction there. I was gonna go 27-17 Bucs.
I thought about it. That's what I debated.
Yeah. I think it will be, somewhat of a close game in the first half, but I think the Buccaneers will make the adjustments in the second half and kind of pull away. I expect them to kind of get that pull away fourth quarter that we're looking for, and they win 27-17. And again, yeah, the Saints, the key to this game and what I'm really looking for, fast start. Like, you got to be able to start fast. And I think if you can do that and protect the football, you have a good opportunity to go 6-2, and to be 6-2 at the bye week, I think would be huge for this team. And I think it really sets you up well for the second half of the season.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's something that the Buccaneers have only done a handful of times in their franchise history, and to have the start that they have to their 50th season is pretty cool to see. And I think a loss, yes, you would enter the bye week at 6-3, which isn't, or I'm sorry, 5-3, 5-3, which isn't an awful record. The Bucs won a Super Bowl being 8-5 at one point. So you can dig your way out of 5-3, but I think that a 5-3 with a loss to the 1-6 Saints before the bye week, it would take every ounce of wind from the sails of a largely historic 5-1 start for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So both of us picking the Buccaneers to win. Would not be shocked if they lose, but picking the Bucs to win, they should win. They have done a good job at beating all the teams they should beat so far this season, and I look forward to hopefully getting healthy on the other side of the bye week. If we get any more updates, of course, we will keep you posted as we continue to do shows, hoping for good news. And, of course, we will be live Sunday after the game, youtube.com/cannonfirepodcast. That'll be our post-game call-in show. Looking forward to that. But that's going to do it for today's game preview episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I want to thank our guest from Real Bucs Talk, Michael Pless. Michael, where can the people find you guys and your great Bucs content?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Rhett. It was awesome to be back on here, and I sound like my normal self, so that was cool. Yeah, you can catch us at Real Bucs Talk. Check us out on YouTube. Also, check out our Substack. We have 2 really great videos diving into, yes, the loss against the Lions, but we went over the passing offense of the Buccaneers, what gave them trouble, and then we went into the defensive performance and a lot of highlights on the defensive side. I know a lot of people were, saying, oh, the defense has to be better. Well, they played pretty damn good against the Lions, and I think you have to take that as momentum into this game, and hopefully, like you said, we get a win and move to 6-2. And again, appreciate the time, and we'll have to do this sometime soon again.
Absolutely. Always looking forward to chopping it up, talking some Bucs ball with you. You can find our show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. You can also find myself, Instagram, and Twitter at Reticus, Retttt, I almost forgot how to spell my own name for a minute. If you follow me, I will follow you back on those respective platforms. And please check out the Rondé Barber Show. We got new episodes coming out every single Wednesday. This week's episode, we had Kenny Albert from Fox Sports, and I found out that he is the only play-by-play guy right now to do all 4 major sports. He is doing NFL, MLB, NHL, and NBA in the U.S. and Canada. So that was a good conversation and a little bit of preview for Bucs versus Saints. We will talk to you on Sunday after the game. Win, lose, or draw, youtube.com/Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, Rhett Matthews, signing off for my guest today, Michael Pless from Real Bucs Talk. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.